This site's going to be horribly familiar to those who served probably in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s. You have here an RVD, residual vapour detector. NA was for nerve agent, H was for blister agent.
This is former signaller and NBC, nuclear, biological and chemical defence fanatic, Ian Foulkes. Ian's now retired and very keen to show off his extensive collection of NBC kit through the ages.
The Germans had a much more formalised gas mask.
But there's a reason for his fascination, because in 1983, aged just 19 years old, Ian did something extraordinary.
It felt like my windpipe had shrunk down to the size of a straw, so my breathing was quite laboured. As I was stepping out, a headache was starting to develop, and after about half an hour the pinpointing of the eyes really did kick in, and I was blind. We all joked about, oh yeah, you go there, you'll get nerve agent. The vast majority didn't, but I was one of the ones that, if you like, rang all the cherries in the fruit machine. So you have to put a positive spin on it.
Ian was one of tens of thousands of servicemen who effectively volunteered to be poisoned in the name of science over the course of the 20th century. Chemicals first began being used significantly in warfare in 1915, when Germany released tons of chlorine gas along the Western Front. In search of more knowledge, in 1941, a programme was set up at Porton Down. It was known as the Human Volunteers Programme. Its participants referred to as human observers. For almost half a century, scientists tested low doses of over 400 different chemicals on serving personnel who volunteered themselves as guinea pigs. The experiments were diverse. Ian was exposed to sarin. Others were given drugs to see how it impacted their functioning. Some had been given LSD and then made to conduct an exercise, which, they proved, was wholly unsuccessful.
But 70 minutes after the administration of the drug, with one man climbing a tree, the troop commander gives up, saying, "I cannot do anything about this. I cannot control the men, and I can take no action myself. I am wiped out as an attacking force."
One veteran reported having been given alcohol, cannabis, cocaine, heroin and LSD, all over his 2-week testing period at Porton Down in the 70s. He then had to drive an assault course after each drug had been administered.
There was a wide range of tests conducted involving both liquid agents and agent vapour. These agents involved also lethal agents, which were typically developed for their lethal effects, but also harassing agents, also incapacitating agents, as well as riot control agents. Some of these tests were designed to look at the effects of exposure. Others were designed to demonstrate the efficacy of certain protective equipment. So some of the skin patch testing, for example, was designed to demonstrate what exposure looked like if, for example, the agent had gone through your fatigues onto the skin.
You had to go through 2 doors. The first was obviously the outside door. You then stepped into, if you like, the sealed area, and then the inner door was opened. They looked to me like the kind of doors you have on ships, where they dog them down and they're watertight. They looked exactly like that. I was starting to get a bit apprehensive, because now I really am stepping into the unknown. The chamber itself, after you walked in through the door, had a glass partition for the scientists to observe you and what was going on.
Ian was most likely chosen for the sarin tests on account of his high lung capacity. He was a water polo player and fitter than most. He says right up to the last minute he was given the chance to withdraw, but Ian stuck with the tests. Sarin gas is odourless and tasteless, but an ether was added so the scientists conducting the tests would know if their own protective equipment had failed.
I have to say, I can't describe the smell, but if I ever did smell it again, I would probably run screaming. Once I was in the chamber, I was there for 30 minutes, and I had to walk around in a circle to the beat of a metronome. And every 5 minutes I would change direction to stop me getting too dizzy. As the evening wore on and I got back to the accommodation, The other two guys didn't like the look of me. By this time I had a splitting headache. I was salivating quite badly. So they took me down to the med centre. They called out a doctor. He basically said, well, there's not really a lot we can do. I could give you eye drops to help with the pinpointing of the eyes, but if you can get by without them so that you don't throw too much of a spanner, if you like, into the results. He must have been a used car salesman at some point, because he persuaded me and I carried on with it. I didn't really get any sleep that night, but the headache started to go away.
Some say Ian's 30-minute exposure to sarin could have killed him. In the long term, he says he certainly lost his edge at water polo and became far more prone to chest infections. Other veterans also suffered. A recent research study suggested a 6% increased risk of mortality amongst those who took part in tests when compared with other veterans. Some, including Ian, have received compensation. All those who took part in the Human Volunteers programme chose to do so, although whether they were informed of the actual purpose of the experiments and the agents being used wasn't always clear. In the early days, many were told this was research into the common cold. What is evident is their contribution was crucial.
These individuals volunteered, they took on risks, and much like other service personnel, they saw that as part of their role. We still benefit in many ways from the research that was conducted then. They did do a service to the country, but also, and this fed on and benefited many other states as well in terms of protecting civilians and troops. And I think that good defensive work that they were involved in has also been really important in removing the incentive for states or sub-state groups to develop and use these weapons, because we have continued at pace to develop our defensive capability. I do believe there's a greater threat from sub-state actors than there's ever been. That's not to say it's a huge threat, but certainly I think there is a risk that groups will pursue this, and I think events in Salisbury, events in Syria, events more recently in Ukraine have emphasised the importance of defence and the importance of not letting this area kind of rot away. And this might be then a good time to actually take greater pride in that history, and also to allow the veterans to take greater pride in that history as well.
As it says here, you were exposed without wearing a respirator to the nerve agent GB.
Now, all these years on, Ian is on a mission. He wants to find other veterans involved in the tests and form an association. He's also begun a medals campaign to try to earn the veterans the recognition he believes they deserve.
What we did was unique. You've seen that the nuclear veterans have at long last been awarded their medal, long overdue, and I think it's now time that the Porton Down veterans were recognised in the same way. What we did was for the benefit of the nation.
The MOD gave us a statement. They said, "We hugely value our service personnel and veterans and owe a debt of gratitude to all those who serve, often with great personal sacrifice. Since 1916, over 20,000 volunteers have taken part in our testing programme at Porton Down, which is operated to the highest ethical standards. With their invaluable support, we've developed the highly effective protective clothing, training and medical measures that armed forces rely on today. Veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme." Hannah King, Forces News. Thanks for watching. For more from Forces News, like and subscribe to our channel.